You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in Perry Skoutelas, CEO and co-founder of Gladiate, the modern operating system for personal injury. How are you, Perry?
I'm doing well, Benny. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And before we get into your story, I do want to give a shout to our friends and business partners over at Lex Reception, which is going to give you less admin work and more time for yourself. You can switch off knowing your calls are covered by Lex Reception, from answering calls and messages in real time to appointment scheduling. Your clients are going to receive the care and support they need with Lex. Their legal answering specialists are on hand 24/7, so you'll never miss a call or a future case. With custom scripting and software that can seamlessly integrate with your current workflow, Lex Reception will make sure every potential client gets fantastic service from the very first call. And Lawyer Stories wants to save you some money, $250 off your first month of service with Lex. So thank you to our friends over at Lex Reception. Perry, back to you.
Yeah.
So
Those are announcements. It's all important stuff. We'll chat about
it is
that.
very important. They do a very helpful service for attorneys 24/7. So
Yeah.
So Perry, I'm just going to jump right in. You're a law graduate and you have an interesting story because you're sort of in like the tech space, right? Like that's always been your thing. And I'm going to ask you some questions leading up to that. But
Yeah.
so you're a Syracuse grad, go Orange, right? I think they dropped the man. I think it's like Orange instead of
Orange now. Yeah.
Right. So, and then you went to Fordham Law. So tell me, why law school?
Yeah. It's an interesting journey for sure. I characterize myself as a non-traditional law student, non-traditional lawyer.
Yep.
Bar, but never practiced. So I went to, as you said, undergrad up at Syracuse in upstate New York, and then lived in Manhattan and New York City for a long time. And
Nice.
during that time, went to Fordham in the evening program. So everything about my law school experience was very different. I mean, I wasn't a poli-sci undergrad. I studied finance and economics.
Wow.
And I was working full time while going to school, so I wasn't going back to school full time. I actually happened to get engaged in the first year of law school, so I had all of the sort of things, stacked in that sort of non-traditional camp. But I was really interested in it. I mean, I had a chance to take a business law class in undergrad. It sort of began to sort of plant the seed, get me interested in some of the legal issues, topics, and particularly with a business bent. It was really interesting to me. And for the first 2 years of law school, because it's 4 years in the evening, for the first 2 years, I really had an interest and intent to practice, but do so in-house within a technology company. I happened to be working in tech at the time and thought it was a really interesting chance to go back to school, keep broadening the skill set,
Sure.
learning a different way of thinking and adding a different value day in, day out. And then, of course, life happens, kind of the roles and opportunities I kept kind of finding in my day job just kept evolving and in an interesting, different way. And took a different opportunity when I left law school to join an early stage startup, and one thing led to another. So I never got out and practiced day in, day out, but it was certainly an interesting journey and a grind.
Yeah, no, for sure. We all go through the grind if we're, we get the legal education. So, what did you do between going to Syracuse? You took a few years off. So, what did you do between like the Syracuse and going to Fordham Law?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I studied finance undergrad in economics.
Yep.
And really from high school on, I really had an interest in working in finance at a bank. So I pursued that from really my first summer during college, had a chance to have an internship at a bank in Pennsylvania. And then I moved to New York. I had internships in New York, both within two different financial services sort of areas.
Okay.
One was a wealth management group, and then one was a large investment bank, and pursued that right after undergrad. So I had a chance actually to have a gap summer. I had the summer after undergrad off and went and volunteered at this camp in Greece. It was an amazing experience, and then
Wow.
came
Okay.
back for a fall analyst class. And the timing just lined up where I graduated undergrad 2008. And so my fall analyst class started in the fall of 2008. And it actually coincided. Our first day of the 2-week analyst training program was Monday, September 15th, 2008, which anybody, in the of our age or of an older age would remember. That was a really crazy time to start working. It was the
Yeah.
weekend after Lehman Brothers went bankrupt and went under. And for the next 2 weeks, I was walking into the office every day for this training program at 750 7th Avenue, which was across the street from Lehman Brothers' old building, the Barclays building in
Right.
Manhattan. And people were, after 30, 40-year career, walking out of the old Lehman building carrying boxes as the company was going under. And Morgan
Wow.
Stanley, the company I was at, our stock teetered at, I think, like $4 or $5 for a
Mhm.
couple of weeks there. And my roommate at the time was also at Morgan Stanley. We both thought, this could be it. This could be like the beginning of our career and the end of our career at the same time,
Oh
because it
man.
was the
Yeah.
catastrophic time. I mean, the worst financial crisis since the Depression, and just a stellar time to hop in and start your career and walk into the
Wow.
office like a
Wow.
bright-eyed, bushy-tailed,
Do you think
new
you'd
hire.
still be in it if like it was more like a positive, thing around it? Like there wasn't that downtrend. Do you think you would have stuck with the finance thing, or no?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I think for me, at least, I feel like that experience really shaped my outlook, not only on banking, but also on careers in general,
Yep.
work in general. When you have, at that time, Lehman Brothers was a 150-year-old organization.
Or yep.
Stanley was about 75, 80 years old. You had these big, old, storied banks that were literally, just existed to be able to make a profit and had done so for 150 years. If they could go out of business in 24 or 48 hours, you began to think, well, so suddenly a startup or a tech company is not so risky, right? I might as well be working on something that I find really inspiring, interesting, impactful,
Yeah.
uh, and sort of de-risks it in a way when you see these institutions just go under very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. So like, at what point did you know you were going to make like legal tech career and like not the traditional practice of law?
Yeah. So as I said, I mean, I really started law school thinking I would come out, practice for a
Mhm.
number of years, and ideally work within a tech company in-house counsel. I had a chance when I was early on in my career at Etsy to work with our in-house
Yep.
counsel. That was an interesting opportunity. Began to learn a little bit more about what that looked like, and the path there. And the path was very much, you have to graduate school, you have to go out and work 3 to 7 years at a large corporate law firm, get that corporate legal experience, and then you can kind of
Mhm.
come back and be useful in-house counsel at some early stage company. And ultimately, the roles and opportunities I was getting in tech during the day were just really interesting. They were really impactful. I had a chance to see my work make its way into the product that different companies I was working
And
with.
by the
And
way, like I'm not going to name any of the companies, but like looking at your LinkedIn and your resume over time, like what you've done, you've worked from some really really like well known and solid companies. So these aren't like fly by night companies. So like I think that they're good. You mentioned Etsy, and so that's I think that all carries up to like how we're going to talk about Gladiate soon. But go ahead, continue. Sorry to cut you off.
yeah, Etsy was for me a really transformational experience.
Yeah.
I had a chance to find them in New York around 2011, 2012. Started really uncovering and doing some research and discovery around, who were the interesting tech companies at that time in New York City that were building, great technology products for consumers. I wanted to work on a consumer product because I wanted a product that I could use every day in my life, as well as just work on.
Right.
And had a chance to meet the team. I actually applied at Etsy for an entry level, almost like a customer support type role.
Okay.
just because I wanted to get in. I wanted to get a
Yeah.
foot in the door, start to get in the company. And the first couple interviews, they were kind of looking at me like, why
Yeah.
do you want to do this? Like,
Yeah.
are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to make this move?
Yeah.
You know what you're getting into? Like, this is a very different environment, very different company than, coming from a big bank where, it's
Right.
just a different environment. And, one thing led to another. I had an amazing opportunity to work for a hiring manager who was phenomenal and saw, the opportunity to, help the team and give me a chance. And so I
Yeah.
ended up being really as they created a role that was sort of like an analyst role within this operations group
Wow. Okay.
there to help do data analysis, business
Very nice.
operations type kind of work. And it was a perfect marriage of things that I had experience in my skill set, as well as things I wanted to learn and get exposure to.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, it was just a really unique company, a really unique culture, really unique organization. It was going through this really interesting transformation itself because it was growing from kind of a scrappy, sort of anti-establishment kind of company and culture into a bigger established mainstream company. And now
Sure.
it's a large public company a lot of people know. But
Sure. And it's interesting. I feel like it does take that one person to be like, okay, well, you're a lawyer, you went to law school, you have this banking experience, like, and they ask the question, and like, still to this day, like, and it happened to me too, because I'm licensed in 3 states, and I work sort of a non-traditional job, even though my job does pay for one of my bar licenses here in Massachusetts, the one in Massachusetts, but it takes that person to say like, well, why do you want to not practice law? So
yeah,
for everybody out there, like that, here's something we could maybe delve into a little bit. Like, what do
yeah.
you tell somebody who wants to go into an untraditional space, and they have a hiring manager at maybe a company, a tech startup, whatever, and they say, well, why don't you want to, be a lawyer?
Yeah, I think, one, you be ready for the question, know that it's going to come to you because it absolutely will. Like you've seen it, I'm sure you've heard it,
Sure.
like that it will absolutely come to you, not only from hiring managers, but it'll come to you from, friends, family, parents,
Yeah,
siblings,
that's right.
spouses. They'll get it from all corners, why are you doing this? And I think there's a lot of, folks who've said this in different ways, but whenever you get a lot of head scratches, a lot of people asking you or questioning what you're doing, and you know that you're onto something, right?
Yeah.
That's always a good signal. If a lot of people don't understand what you're doing and you have conviction around it,
You get
uh,
those people that say all that schooling, and you're not gonna, you've heard like the same line, all that school, all that knowledge you've soaked up. It's like, okay, all right. It's like the same thing,
yeah,
like you hear the same line. It's like, yeah, yeah, I know, I got a lot of knowledge. Okay.
yeah. And you'll do it to yourself too, right?
Yeah.
You'll ask yourself that question. I asked myself that question many times throughout my career and my time, and even in school. Am I going to continue? Am I going to pursue it? Should I finish law school knowing if I'm not going to practice? Should I take the bar knowing I'm not going to practice? Right? You kind of continually ask yourself that question, and obviously everybody has to answer it individually. But for myself, it was very much, I always finish what I start. I'm going to give it 110%. I'm going to keep pushing through. I'm going to keep using this. And you never know. You never know where it's going to be useful to you. You never know in what way you're going to use that degree and what way you're going to
That's
apply
right.
it. And sometimes it'll be applied, right out of school in a legal job. You may take that job at a big firm or a small firm right away, and then you may decide, well, I'm going to go move on and do something else different altogether, right? And so you kind of find your own path, or you may get out and not practice and apply it in a different way, and then later on in your career or life find a way back to it if it's really a true interest and passion to you.
That's right. That's right. So, like, what is your definition of an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there's, of course, probably lots of variations on how people define that. For me, the best definition I've come across that I've heard that really resonated with me came from somebody much smarter than myself, who is Tina Seelig. She's a professor. I'm not sure if she's still a professor at Stanford Business School, and she taught a course for many years that was released via podcast. So I listened to it, 15, 20 years ago, and listened to all of the courses that she had taught. And one of them, she delves into this exact topic, entrepreneurship. What is it? And she characterized it as, an entrepreneur is somebody who makes their own business cards, right? To some extent. And I think that, that speaks to, the level of sophistication that's needed, which there isn't right? It's something that you can begin to do at a young age, and for myself, I had always loved creating, making, building, even
Yep.
from a young age. That was a passion of mine, in different ways, as a kid all the way through high school and college. And, ultimately, I think it is just about being able to envision and create and make, and it begins with writing down, what do you want to do? And, maybe that comes in the form of a business card, maybe it comes in the form of a journal, but you
Right.
begin to put down pen to paper and begin to visualize and create a world that you want to create, that you want to make.
Right. Right. So I'm going to ask you for some more advice. So, like, what would you say to a law student who believes they discovered a niche, like within legal tech, and would like to pursue that route? Say it's like a second year law student.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that you want to do right away, right? And they all involve cultivating and fostering that interest. I think that the best advice I give is talk to people, right? If you have an idea for an interesting product, a niche you've uncovered, or something you want to explore, essentially, an itch you want to scratch,
Yep.
then just begin talking to people, begin interviewing people, begin reaching out and getting perspectives from folks that you think might have that problem or that challenge that you want to help solve. Because those conversations will help you shape and refine the idea. It'll help you get clarity on where do you have some blind spots, where do you have some gaps, what do
Right.
you need to be thinking about. I think the tendency, right, or sort of that mainstream tendency is that you've got an idea and you want to hold on to it. You want to keep it. You want to be a little bit fearful that someone else could poach that idea. But at the end of the day, what you realize is that the idea is, 1%. The execution is the 99%.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Love
and
that. Yep.
you've created lawyer stories. You brought this community to life. There are probably many, many folks who've thought, oh, there should be something like that out there, right?
Yeah.
And just having the ideas is just it's a good start. Yeah, but it's just a start.
You got to
You gotta
go with
begin
it.
to execute, begin to
You
put it
gotta
in
go,
motion,
yep.
begin
You
to
got
take
to
action.
execute and be consistent and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So, scratch the itch, begin to talk to folks, understand, where your thinking can evolve, and through those conversations, you'll probably find some good mentors, some good advisors, some good people that could help you shape that product in one way or another. Maybe they'll help you bring it to life. Maybe they'll be your first customers. Maybe they'll be, folks that you can just laugh with and learn from on the journey. So I think those conversations are incredibly important and ones that I've always, felt very grateful for. I've been very grateful for people that have shared some time with me, and many of them have, many folks in your community, and not only in this journey, but even in past roles. I early on as a kid, I think I discovered the power of sending a cold email. And that was probably around middle school where I sent an email to Gary Becker, who's kind of a famous, no longer alive, but a famous Nobel Prize winning economist. And I
Hmm.
was really surprised he even responded to my email because I wrote him this
Wow.
email based on an essay he had written. I said, oh, this was sort of my interpretation of it. And it was all about, a national standard minimum wage and the impact on economies. And I had a theory about it, and I kind of wanted to get
Nice.
his
Wow.
perspective on it. And he just wrote back. He wrote me an email back and just said,
That's
I
awesome.
appreciate the email. Here's my answer to your question. But just that connection, just the fact that I could send out this email, Gary at uchicago.com, and he wrote me
Yeah.
back, and it was just like, wow, like there's a lot of power that can come from that realization that you're in control. You dial up the number, you send the note, knock on the door, and sometimes it might open.
Yeah, that's true. You don't get an answer unless, I mean, you don't get an answer unless you try, right? I mean, you gotta,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So let's talk about Gladiate. Tell us about when you had the idea for Gladiate.
Yeah, it goes back really. I mean, I had been building products, obviously, full time, working on different products for different tech companies. I'd built a number of things, in my time. One of the last roles I had full time was really at Grubhub, a large,
That's right.
food delivery company. I built a product there and managed a team that was building this large in-house analytics engine to help the company consume all of this, impression data that the diners were scrolling through. But COVID hit, And like many of us, I had a lot more time for side projects. Nights and weekends opened up.
Yep.
I had a family, but I'm just one of those people who's a glutton for punishment. I love, working and tinkering on things. And I had built a product for my church, actually in Chicago at that time, and it was really a community fundraising kind of tool. And I had another friend buddy who looked at it and said, "This is exactly what we need for Chamber of Commerce in Lincoln Square in Chicago."
Yep.
And Chicago has these very prominent city neighborhoods, right? 77 different neighborhoods that make up Chicago, and each have their own street festivals. And during COVID, they couldn't have any of the street festivals. You couldn't bring together all these businesses. You couldn't line them up as they did. And Lincoln Square was one of those neighborhoods that had a very large street festival. A 3-day street festival for the neighborhood generated about $1 million in revenue for
Wow.
all the small businesses in that particular area. And the director of the chamber was just going to cancel their Square Roots Festival, which was their large festival every year.
Mm-hmm.
And they had seen this product I had built and said, "Can we use this for our festival?" And so we ended up making a little change. I had another friend help me build the back end, engineering, the back end software piece of it. The front end I had built myself, and then we pulled together the 40 businesses that were located around Lincoln Square, and they each got their own, set of pages to showcase their own products, sell their own products,
Mm-hmm.
and then receive orders. And we ended up running the Square Roots Festival entirely virtually online, and then did
Wow.
about 9 different markets around Chicago over the course of COVID, like we're in that early first year of COVID. And as a product, it did really well. It had a good traction. I didn't see legs in it beyond COVID, only because once the world reopened, I thought people would just go back to shopping in stores, and they wouldn't really want to shop from their local business online.
Yeah.
But it was a good product, and for me, it firmly planted that seed of, this is what I want to do the next decade, is continue to build products, lean into it, particularly for small businesses, build products for businesses that have a need, and help them navigate some of those challenges and friction points that come along with using tech in their everyday
Yep.
organizations. I got a chance to get connected with a few colleagues from Fordham. One of them who had a good friend who's running a PI practice, a personal injury practice in New York City, and had a chance to sit with him, understand what his practice looked like, how it had evolved. It was himself, a small team, but he had grown it to be a pretty large practice, 300-400 cases that he was managing all around New York, and without a system, without any software, without any tooling, and just kind of understanding, like, what did that look like day in, day out? How did he manage his communication? How did he work with his team? How did he handle handoffs of information, tasks, and notes? And how did he communicate with his clients? And in the course of that, really, hatched and began to develop the thesis, as well as the first version of the product that is Gladiate now, really an operating system just tailored to PI.
That's amazing, and you came full circle, like kind of back to like the legal thing.
Yeah.
Like that's, I mean, I think that's so. Gladiate is, you've called it the modern operating system for PI.
Yeah.
Like tell us like how it helps people who have the 300 to 400 cases.
Yeah, there's a number of ways. I think it comes back to what's on the plate, right, of the average firm founder.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, there's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
massive undertaking, right? And it's not dissimilar from just starting your own business, pick any industry, because you're not only developing your product and your service, which every law firm owner is, right? They're providing a service that is legal services to their clients. But then at the same time, if you're building your own firm, you're also you're also building a process around that.
Right.
You need to have systems and organizations in place. Otherwise, you are really in a tough spot trying to meet those clients' needs day in, day out consistently. And it's very much a dual challenge, being both the trial lawyer, the head trial lawyer, the CEO, the CFO, the chief client satisfaction officer,
Yeah.
your own firm. And really what we've been working to build within Gladiate is a much simpler, easier way to manage all of those functions, right, that come along with running your firm day in, day out, starting with even like the most basic process of intake, right? Of signing up
Right.
your client and engaging them and bringing them into your firm and onboarding them into your firm. That is an area where there's a lot of um, room for improvement over that ad hoc process that a lot of firm owners go through, where they just pick up the phone and jot down a few notes and are off and running trying to help that client to help
Right.
implementize it.
I feel like it's so different now. Things out
Yeah,
there, especially I hear a lot about intake.
yeah.
In fact, today I posted a clip about intake. So what is it about intake that Gladiate can really help an attorney with? Like if they're sitting at their computer, they get a call, and you're right. Like I feel like the traditional attorney, they got that legal pad. They're
Yeah.
writing down the scratching the notes, like okay, car accident, like whatever. Like what are they gonna do? Like with how's Gladiate gonna help them lead through the process?
Yeah, it's really about taking that process that is involved in helping sign that new client on and turning it into the simplest parts possible. So really throughout the life of an injury uh, case, we've gone and helped dial in that operation to its most simplest parts, the fewest number of clicks even. So we've counted the number of clicks that it takes to perform a common
Wow.
action, because
Okay.
if you're doing this process day in, day out, each additional click, each additional step is really a tax. It's a tax on yourself, it's a tax on your team, and you're paying that tax because you haven't decided to invest in building that process and building that system from the beginning. And really in that first call, I mean, we've actually done our own survey, our own research among clients.
Hmm.
The last time we ran it, we conducted a survey of more than 1,500 clients
Wow.
from across the country who had contacted a personal injury attorney after an accident. We asked them all sorts of questions about, how they found that attorney, how they contacted them, what the experience was like, what
Hmm.
mediums did they contact them through, how do they want to be contacted back from the attorney, how often did they hear from them, how likely were they to recommend them to a family or friend, all sorts of questions. But a few things popped out, and one of the statistics was that 3 out of 4 clients after their accident will contact multiple attorneys. So 75%
Interesting.
are calling more than one. And so
Interesting.
that first call that you have with a client is really about, building the rapport, building the empathy, ensuring that they know you have knowledge in this domain, you've handled these types of cases, you can help them. And then in addition to just building that confidence and getting that client on board, you know, uh, mentally, having the process set up to physically sign them up right away.
Okay.
You can't delay in that process. And so one of the things we've released is actually a patent pending process that takes all of those steps that attorneys and their staff are typically doing to open the file, open the case, right, to create the contact information, generate the documents that need to be signed, and do all of that with one button, one click. So
Gotcha.
one click sign up
Wow.
process.
Okay. That's huge.
Yeah, we've seen the power of it, right? There's really, uh, the time that you spend, the energy you spend as a firm owner should be spent on client experience, client rapport, not on the logistics of opening the file, opening the case, and getting them to sign the key documents you need to start working on it. That part of the process should be dialed in and as efficient as possible so that firm owners can spend the time, meeting the client physically in person or chatting with them over the phone and building that rapport, because it's both parts that need to be there to have a successful client onboarding.
So not to get like too specific, but like what does that one click do for the onboarding process? Like what
Yeah.
information will it capture?
Yeah, it really helps firm owners and their staff take care of the 6 or 7 steps that they would go through to
Okay.
typically create that matter, create that case, and get those key documents generated and signed all at once. So, phone rings and the attorney, if they're answering their own phone, or their staff who's answering the phone, or Lex reception if they're answering the phone for
There you go.
for
Shout out to Lex.
yeah, on behalf of the firm, can jot down the key pieces of information, right? And typically, the uh, pieces of info that are needed by the firm are, the client's basic biographical information, name, sometimes an address is included in their documentation. The date of the incident is really critical, right? Because that's when the statute begins to track. So having all that data as it's entered into the system and into Gladiate as part of our quick intake process can be just jotted down into the system, whether you're on your phone or at your desktop. And then with the one-click button, you can generate all of your initial agreements that you need to go out. And there's typically, of course, a fee agreement, right? Whether to stipulate what the fee is and how it works. There's also typically some authorizations, right? Release of information, because you're going to have the client sign that right away to make sure you can, request information on their behalf, incident reports or medical records. And there's also typically a medical record authorization form, a HIPAA release form. So all of those can be teed up so they can be populated with all the client's information that's input and then sent for signature via text and email. And
Wow.
again, it's triggered with one button.
So is it just questions, or is it the actual law firm's document that's uploaded into the system?
The actual document. Yeah, it's
Wow.
all the firm's own documentation that's
Right.
templatized and loaded in. Yeah.
So after the onboarding process, when you got the person signed up with one click, all the info you needed, so then like what happens as the lawsuit progresses? Like what is
Yeah.
Gladiate doing? What's the function?
Yeah, there's many different steps throughout the life of the case, right? There's a lot that goes into managing the
Sure.
client experience and the client relationship to generating all the key documents, information. And there's just different things that we've done it throughout the life of the case. To give you an example, even the client ongoing updates, right? The case updates, as they're called, are really critical. And we've released a feature that we call campaigns that
Mhm.
allows firms to tee up information that they can drip to clients as their case progresses.
Okay.
So to produce their own educational content, firms can produce it, link back to their own website or link back to YouTube,
Okay.
and be able to trigger information go out to the clients at key intervals to say, hey, here's what this next stage of your case looks like, right? While you're treating, here's what you need to know about what we're doing on our end to help move your case forward. And that
Okay.
regular type of communication is very important. We've seen
Mhm.
through the research and survey we've done, it came back loud and clear that the number one driver of client satisfaction is frequency of communication. How often they heard from the attorney, was really the
Yeah.
driver, how likely they
Yeah.
were to recommend them. The number two driver was case outcome. So clients are more concerned with how often they hear from the attorney to make sure they feel like they're being taken
Mhm.
care of, that the attorney and their staff are working on their case more than the outcome of the case sometimes.
Really?
So it's
So that,
really
it's
important.
super interesting, like how you've really like used your knowledge to like, crunch the statistics from things your past, like learning how
Yeah.
to and bring it back to like, this really important like legal to gladiate. Using these skills, crunching the statistics. I mean, those are really interesting and I think important statistics that you're talking about.
Yeah, they're really vital. We've done the work to ask some important questions of clients about their client experience, all with the purpose of saying, okay, well, while we know this, right, we know it to be true what clients look for, how they evaluate attorneys, how they reach out to them, how they'd like to be contacted, how likely they are to recommend them. Now, can we take those insights and help bake them into the product to
Right.
design a tool and a system that's not only easier and simpler to use, but helps firms really build a great firm, right? Really build on that client experience, earn more five-star Google reviews, and provide that five-star experience that many firm owners crave. They want to be able to do it.
Yeah.
You need a process and you need a system. It won't just happen magically.
So who should be using Gladiate?
So we're designed for founding personal injury attorneys, and we say that specifically founding personal injury attorneys because we're building for the firm owners ultimately, right?
Okay.
They are in our vision, who are designing the system for. They're also who we partnered with to design the product. So we've actually partnered with
Amazing.
more than 100 founding personal injury attorneys, paralegals, case managers from around the country to design the product and bring it to life based on their feedback and their interest on and understanding, exactly how they function day in day out. Where in the world they are when they're trying to get key documents out or sign
Yeah.
next client, or even understand their own firm's performance, their team's performance. And so we're really very much building for that firm owner, that founding injury attorney who is the CEO of their firm, a trial lawyer who's building their own practice.
Yeah, I feel like we know a lot of those here in the Lawyer Stories community. A lot of PI people who just started out or launching their own firm, and I know I saw like a familiar logo or two on the website, which is it's great. I mean,
Yeah, it's a terrific group.
yeah,
Ultimately, that's a major source of motivation, not only for
yep,
myself but for our team. And one thing we've enjoyed being able to do, even for our own team, is bring on founding injury attorneys into our team for fireside chats, just to
yeah,
understand experience and learn from them, because that mindset they have in starting their own firm is really important. And it's just a very challenging role, right? You're starting off building your own practice from the ground up.
sure,
You're doing everything. You're serving every function. You have to wear every hat, and your clients depend on you and count on you. Your team, your family, if you have one, yourself, to be able to provide and build a great firm. And we see our mission vision as doing everything in our power to bring the right set of tools, for those firm owners.
that's awesome. So, what are like the three most common mistakes that, excuse me, you see new law firm owners make?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'd say there's certainly a an intense focus on signing new cases and signing new clients, right? And that's important, right? It's the lifeblood of the firm, is bringing in new business every day, but it's often a real tunnel vision, right? And I think that the biggest one of the biggest mistakes that new firm owners face is just a tunnel vision on bringing on new cases, signing new clients, signing new cases,
Mhm.
without as much of an appreciation for what opportunity exists in managing the cases they have really efficiently. And so one thing we've seen, time and time again, is new firm founder will start off in the first, 6 months or year of building their own practice, building their own firm, and they'll just focus on trying to sign new clients, sign new cases, right? And they start off and it's five, and that's 10, it's 20, right? And they begin to amass some
Mhm.
number of cases and clients. And there is of course, a need for that, right? Everybody has to eat. They need to be able to, earn to keep their firm alive.
Mhm.
But that number, that 20, 25, it quickly grows. And then what happens is they're sitting with 100, 200 cases. And every new case you bring into the firm has to be managed, has to be worked.
Yeah,
The client needs updates, they need information. And so bringing on too many cases too quickly without having a process, having a system in place to be able to actually deliver, for those clients, can be overwhelming. And then by the time you get to 100, 200, 300 cases, to then start building a process is very difficult. And so, having more appreciation for the opportunity that exists in just managing the cases you have really efficiently, moving them as efficiently as possible,
right.
and tracking them to make sure that they are uh, moving along as as you need to be able to have that cash flow and be able to survive. Setting up the process to move them really well while you have a manageable number before you've somewhat, overwhelmed yourself, is one of the biggest mistakes. Uh, the Yeah, we can chat more about that one. The other ones we've seen, I'd say just kind of echoes what we talked about earlier, is overlooking the importance of that client experience.
Mm.
Client experience is really critical. So
Yep.
ensuring that you've got, again, that a process and a system set up to make sure that your communication to the client is really consistent, really clear, that you're telling them upfront as much as you can about what the process will look like, setting their expectations accordingly for how long it'll take to work that case,
Right.
and thinking actively about how you can make that client experience just more delightful, right? What can you provide? What do they need to know? One thing that we're surprised every time we talk to new firm founders is we just ask them, what does your sort of initial client survey look like? Like
Mhm.
how do they gauge what the client wants in the experience?
Mhm.
And yeah, it's surprising not as many firm owners as you'd think would ask basic questions like, what do you want as the outcome for this case? What's your ideal result? Asking the client, what do they want to achieve? Right? Is it purely a dollar amount? Do they just want a day in court? What do they want from even bringing a case? And then even asking questions to the client about, how do you want to hear from us? Do you want a text? Do you want a phone call? Would you rather come
Right.
into the office? Just kind of understanding their preferences when it comes to how the client wants to be treated can really help firms right size the delivery of that experience, right? Because a one size fits all approach might not work. You might not just want to send the same message to every client. You might want to tailor a little bit depending on the client's needs. So that client experience is really, a very critical point. And the last major mistake we see many firm owners make is trying to fly their firm, for the airplane analogy, is trying to fly their firm without instruments.
Mm.
And, I've flown for a little while. I'm not a licensed pilot, but I have flown for a little while. I know enough to
Really?
know you don't want to do that. There-
Wow. All
There's
right.
a lot of risk that you take when you are purely flying by sight and flying, especially at night. That's why it takes a certain amount of training to be able to fly at night, because you have to be able to fly by instruments, because once that sun goes down, you're flying over a body of water. You don't really know what the sky is and what the ground is. And for a lot of firm owners, they're ultimately flying blind, that they
Yeah.
don't really have a lot of data on their firm. We'll
Yeah.
ask some basic questions when we first meet a new firm. And it's information that every firm owner should know cold, right? You should know the number of clients you have, know the number of open cases you have, know how long those cases have been on your desk, know what your average revenue is per case, know where your cases are coming from. What does that breakdown look like? What sources are they coming from? And some of these basic numbers, some of the basic data is really, really important for firm owners to get control over their businesses.
Yeah.
And get it. I mean, most lawyers don't love numbers, don't love data. That's why they went to law school. They didn't really want to get into the data. But it's really the difference between firms that are in control and thriving and growing versus firms that
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
keeping it going, keeping it afloat.
Do you feel that, Perry, do you feel that like going to law school has helped you with Gladiate and like understanding like some of the more the like the technical terms and relating to lawyers, like they probably know that you're an attorney, like has that helped?
I think it's absolutely helped. I think everything that we can do in our lives to give ourselves a chance at better empathy, right, helps, right? Empathy is really difficult, right? To understand what someone else is going through is really
Yeah.
hard to do. And I think some of the most phenomenal personal injury lawyers, trial lawyers, have been in catastrophic accidents themselves, right? It gives
Yes.
them a sense of empathy. They understand what their client is going through. They can empathize. They can deliver a better experience than the next attorney or the next trial lawyer. And, similarly, I think going through the experience, right? Being a lawyer, going through that process, going through law school, it absolutely has helped understand the mindset of our firm owners, what they're going through, what they've been through, and how they think. And being able to bring that empathy to the table in building, designing the product, engaging with firms, partnering with them has absolutely been incredibly helpful. It's just building that rapport and helping them feel comfortable that we understand what they're going through.
And you might also have a network, right? Like from law school or maybe whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. The network is critical. I'm a big believer in building a network, from day one in any venture that you're working on. It's
Yeah.
critical. The community that you're building at Lawyer Stories, community is everything, right? To be able to foster that community, cultivate it, ask yourself, how can I be valuable to the community? What can I give back? What can I do to
Yeah.
make it more valuable is really critical.
Yeah. Totally. Do you use any AI at all with Gladiate?
Yeah, there's a number of things we're working on, a number of ways we think AI is going to be, very impactful to firm owners, and particularly, the personal injury space is no different. One thing I will say is most firm owners have a number of things they need to do first, right, before they can just worry about implementing AI into
Yeah.
their practice. I think there's a lot of organization that's necessary first and foremost, to have really good processes dialed in, really good tracking, really good data around the health of their firm, really good documentation and knowledge management for their own staff
Sure. Yeah.
to be able to know what to do. All that's really critical. And that's where we think AI will certainly be an accelerator of each of those functions more than just its own standalone tool. It's about how do we help make the insights and the analytics more readily available, more accessible, with less input, with less work on the part of the firm owner. How do we help the tracking, the documentation of the firm's own processes more readily available with AI, and without the manual work of creating their own processes and creating their own documentation. So it's more of an enhancer to each of those key core functions that the firm owners have to tackle than it is just something else to be bolted on the side. But yeah, absolutely a critical way to help firm owners speed up and do more with less.
So, is there anything that you wanted to share about Gladiate that I might not have asked about?
Yeah, I think we covered a good good bit of it. I'd say in general, firm owners just ask questions. The best firm owners are the ones who ask questions not only of the companies they work with, right, the systems that they run on, but also asking questions about their own operation, their own firm. Be curious.
Yeah.
About how they're operating, where their cases are coming from. Be very curious about that. Ask those questions. Dig a little deeper, and of course, reach out.
That's great. So when did you launch actually?
So we launched in 2022.
Okay. All
Two
right.
years since we've been full time on it. I was working on about 6 months before we were officially full time on it.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything with us about
Yeah.
it. We hope we can introduce you to the right people we're happy to make those introductions. When you see them on Lawyer Stories, let me know. I'll do a warm intro, whatever you need. And, we really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you. Much appreciated on my end. I think I mentioned to you, I'm a longtime listener. This is the first time calling in, so I appreciate the community. I appreciate what folks have come on and shared in this exact forum. I think there's so much to learn from one another, and I've benefited so much from being able to learn and get to know everyone's stories. And I'm happy to be a resource or share with anybody that would like to learn from me. So
yeah, well, we appreciate it, Perry, and everybody, stay right there. Everybody, thank you for tuning in today. Check out Gladiate, and wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves. Cheers.